We have Akliam PD4. We also have Akliam PD4 Plus. So naturally, Akliam has come up with a successor, which is Akliam PD5 here. Okay, so what's inside the box? Let's just have a look at the price and the configuration itself. Uh, this PD5, you can get it easily from AliExpress store directly from Akliam and price at 63.5 US dollar. But for the sake of, generalization, I just gonna, round it up to 65 US dollar. So what you're gonna get inside is that this dongle itself here, okay? And then this nice looking USB Type-C female to female cable, and also an adapter to connect to PC, which is USB-C to A. Okay, so let's just have a look at the build and the construction itself first for this PD5. And okay, let's just go straight to the configuration. And you would notice that I have also placed there another two dongle for the sake of comparison. So let me just put it this way. This is another AKM AK4493 SEQ dongle. You don't see it much around. So the one that I actually am sharing with you right now is Shanling UA3. Okay, one of the most prominent one, and the recently released Colorfly CDA M1P. All right. So as you can see there, all three of them are equipped with the very same one DAC inside. Okay, AK4493 SEQ. And looking at the op amp or the amplifier for this PD5, it is pretty much identical to the one used in Shanling. And Shanling has been, quite popular, known to use this dual Ricoh RT6863 amplifier. Okay. However, when we look at Colorfly CDA M1P, it is different. Obviously, instead of using RT6863, it uses XR2001 amplifier or op amps. I would say that when we look at signal to noise ratio, it is quite good at 120 dB from the single-ended and 125 dB from the balance. So which means that the balance is more silent, supposedly. Okay. And to test that theory, how good is this PD5 with highly sensitive IM? I have tested this PD5 with this super sensitive IM which I am reviewing right now, which is IO Volare. Okay, so one of the key reasons that I opted to use this is that because one, this is a hybrid. It has three different type of driver and probably uses crossover as well. And most interestingly, impedance rating of just 2.9 ohm. Yes, this is literally the lowest impedance rating I have ever come across in any IM, near close to 1 or even 0 ohm, which is crazily very, very sensitive. And the sensitivity of this IM is also rated at 121 dB, crazy high. So if you want to hear any kind of low noise, this IM will reveal it. And true enough, when I connect it to this dongle of mine, which is Ovidius B1, the first thing that greet my ear was like floor noises. So, is this PD5 silent with that rating? Yes, true indeed. I have tested it with this IM here. Again, let me remind you, 2.9 ohm. And this PD5 was thankfully super silent even when attached to my PC here, USB 3.0, right? Be it from the single-ended or from the 4.4 mm balance, I am not hearing any kind of floor noise. So good job there, AKM. Akliam, sorry. Earlier today, I woke up very early in the morning, probably at around 3 a.m. Okay, and now it's already like 9:38 a.m. So let me just share with you what I did between that time. Okay, just before this video, I have done this. As you can see here, all right, I have actually tested this PD5 with some of the dongle, my favorite dongles and DAC amp, which I have here. Let me just introduce to you, perhaps no need introduction, this Playmate Burson Audio Playmate 2, which is my reference DAC amp running on V7 op amp, which is the highest configuration. And also I have with me here, which is Hebe FC6, the current champion for Dongle Madness. Okay. And I also have with me here one of my latest favorite, which is EPZ TP50. Okay. And last but not least, I have this big boy here, which is this FIO Q15. Okay. One of the reasons that I'm showing you is that because, I have spent roughly at around 3 to 4 hours, okay, perhaps around 3 hours, okay, attaching all these DAC amp dongles with this Sennheiser HD600 here, which is 300 ohm, okay, and started to compare them side by side. So that, I believe it makes more sense for me to explain the sound and the performance of this PD5 when we put into perspective how does it compare with the rest of the competitions, especially with dongles which are well known, especially if you have been following Dongle Madness. So to make things simple, I'm just going to put it this way. All right. I run it through repeatedly with this one particular song from Alison Krauss, which is Goodbye is All We Have. I have listened to this audio, or should I say song, millions of times. It's embedded literally into my mind so that I can observe some of the small differences, okay, that has been exhibited to me throughout these different listening partners. Okay, let me just put it this way. I have a note here. Where is it? Okay, let me just quickly check so that I will not miss anything. Okay, all right. So the conclusion is simple. All right, among all of this, definitely without a doubt, I get the most resolution, the most imaging, the most authority of sound coming for this HD600 from this Burson Audio Playmate 2. No doubt about it. Okay, we are talking about in excess of 3000 milliwatt of power with high-end op-amp inside, with the kind of sound tuning and everything. So the most analytical among all of them, all right, as you can see here, tested, compared together, is still Burson Audio Playmate 2. Not really a surprise, because I would be really surprised if any of them would be more analytical or more technically competent than Burson Audio Playmate 2. However, I must also note that when I compare it with Akliam PD5, okay, the thing is that I have a feeling pretty much, the similarity of the way it present the sound timbre, okay, is pretty much similar, with an exception that, of course, this Playmate 2 sounds a bit more richer, better authority with the dynamic itself, but by how many percent? That would be the question you're going to be asking. And I can safely say that this thing was able to scale up to 85% to what I am hearing from this Burson Audio Playmate 2. That is crazy impressive, right? Seriously, because looking at the real estate itself, what's inside that Burson Audio Playmate 2 and this dongle, which is relatively super cheap and so small, it is pretty much on par with what I am hearing from this EPZ TP50. Okay, so how about the other two? Then you might be asking. So I might just declare, I just gonna declare that based on my testing in that 3 hour, all right, surprisingly, all right, the richest sounding with the best sound texture and timbre is still Hebe FC6 together with this FIO Q15. Yes, they may not be as resolving, all right, or as analytical as Burson Audio Playmate 2, but they are outright winner when it comes to overall sound richness, sound texture, and timbre presentation being analog sounding. Okay, a bit more musical than this Burson Audio Playmate 2, but with everything else, of course, that Burson Audio Playmate 2 is still superior. So what I'm trying to say is that if I were to compare between this PD5 with this Hebe FC6, I can safely say that, all right, FC6 still the king when it comes to sound richness, tone and timbre, technicality and dynamics, but this PD5 follows very closely, to a point that the differences are only at around 1 point only, okay, which I will show you later. Comparison aside, generally speaking, this is how it looked like for this PD5, my assessment for this amazing dongle. Have a look at it. So when it comes to dynamic presentation, excellent. Dynamic extension, excellent. The kind of performance that you can expect from top performers of Dongle Madness. And when it comes to sound timbre, very important. This is natural, crisp, analog sound. Okay, and I will explain a bit more on that after this as well. And then when it comes to the way it presents the three dynamic range, which is the mid-range, treble and bass, I would just admit that, when it comes to mid-range, because of the native tuning for AKM, typically it tends to be a bit more frontal. Okay, so it is definitely neutral. Okay, I can feel that there's no coloration or anything like that to the sound itself. It's just feel a bit more frontal, as per expected from many other AKM deck. Okay, that is pretty much a house sound for AKM. And then treble bass, linear neutral, no coloration, perfect. Okay, the staging itself, this dongle is one of the dongle which I consider as being open and spacious sounding. Not exactly wide, but it is definitely that kind of, you can feel that the impression of the sound stage, the head stage itself, it felt open, even when using different type of IEM, which I have here, especially when used with this Sivga Nightingale, my favorite magnetic planar. Everything feels just so airy, open, and spacious. And the same can be said even when I use this Etimotic ER2XR, which is relatively a deep insert IEM, okay? The sound, the impression of the soundstage is definitely good. The difference between this 4.4 mm balance and 3.5 mm single-ended, I would say that, Akliam did a very good job with this 3.5 mm single-ended. The differences is that I just only need to crank perhaps just 4 steps to match the loudness which I am getting from the 4.4 mm balance. But then again, you might be asking, there have to be some sort of differences. Yes, if you are driving something which is relatively very efficient, anything under 32 ohm with sensitivity over 100 dB, most likely once the volume is matched, the quality will be similar. But the story will be different if you start driving something like this Sivga Nightingale magnetic planar, or even something like this, okay, Sennheiser HD600, where they can always appreciate more power. All right, so what I am hearing is that better separation, better layering and imaging, and in fact, a bit more open sense of soundstage. Look at that. It is beginning to look like a carnival over there. And it's not even all of them, okay? I'm just putting up some of the, top performer in Dongle Madness out of 165, 67 dongle which I have tested so far. So let's just have a look here. How does this PD5 compares against the rest of the competition? Let's just compare it with the ones within the same family, which is AK4493 SEQ. Okay, point wise, you can clearly see there, all right, this PD5 is quite impressive, especially when it comes to sound. But let's talk about, the actual usage differences between Shuangling UA3 and also Colorfly CDA M1P. Let's talk about Shuangling UA3 first. Okay, I will just openly admit, the first time when I tested UA3, I was kind of surprised, because if you watch my video, I did mention something like, this AKM sounded more like an ESS Sabre rather than an AKM. So what does it mean? Okay, what I'm trying to say is that at that point of time, okay, when I listened to UA3 with the same sort of gear, especially this Etimotic R2XR, right, it does not emit the kind of sound which I have grown to love, from AKM. It is not smooth enough. It was just simply, focused too much on being technical, or should I say being edgy, crispy, clean sounding, too clean to a point that almost being sterile. And I think the timbre balance was a bit more digital sounding as well. But otherwise, that UA3 was okay. This is just something which I consider as something which sets the difference between dongles, okay? And then let's just have a look at Colorfly CDA M1P. And if you look at the scoring point there on sound, it is quite obvious, right? When it comes to timbre and sound richness, I must admit, right, Colorfly CDA M1P is still the one which is the smoothest around, comparable to this Hebe FC6 or even this FIO Q15, that Colorfly CDA M1P. This PD5, on the other hand, all right, it sounded a bit more like, iBasso DC04 Pro kind of sound smoothness, or even FIO BTR15 here, okay? So it is not exactly as rich or as smooth as Colorfly CDA M1P, but it is smooth enough. Just remember this, okay? We are talking about small differences between top performing dongles. And I am just trying to be critical here, okay? But all in all of them are relatively smooth sounding, okay? And then when it comes to, let's say, comparison with the rest of the competition, in fact, when I reflect on the sound I am hearing from this PD5, it reminded me a lot to some of the top performer like iBasso DC Elite and Kain RU7. Yes, that is pretty much the similarity between them. Okay, it has that good, open, airy analog sound. Okay, with very good technicalities. And considering that this thing is like, not very well hyped or not, priced as competitively or, as high as RU7 or even DC Elite, I think Akliam did an amazing job there. Okay, to produce something which even, capable of standing side by side with those impressive dongles. Last but not least, timbre signature. Have a look there. That's where Akliam PD5 stands at. Especially when compared against, PD4 Plus or even PD4, okay, I think the major improvement which this PD5 offer is that, on the timbre and the sound richness itself, okay. If you were to look back the comparison table or even my review of PD4 and PD4 Plus, okay, perhaps, the critique which I have with those PD4 and PD4 Plus is that they don't sound analog enough for my taste and my preference. They are very technically focused, okay, and not musical enough as compared to this PD5. That's pretty much how I would describe it, okay? Because I test this thing with so many type of listening gear, especially when I use this Etimotic ER2 XR or even this HD600. These two, listening device being very transparent was able to show to me the real nature of the DAC amp itself, the behavior itself. So I am happy to say that, among the three of them, between the Akliam family, I think Akliam did the right choice, the right decision to tune this PD5 not as hi-fi as PD4 or PD4 Plus. Okay, and when we look with the rest of the competition, I already mentioned this earlier as well. This PD5 is in fact within the same segment as Aone Yuki, iBasso DC Elite, Colorfly CDA M2, and even Kaid RU6, RU7 when it comes to sound signature.